All right, guys. If you will, today we're going to talk about simplifying radicals. So if you'll put that in your table of contents, and this is only for if you were absent. If you were here, you saw this lesson already. So once you have that on your table of contents, here is the layout of my page. So if you want to pause and copy that really quick, you can. If you are good to go, I'm going to go ahead and start. Okay, so when I say simplifying radicals, y'all know what this symbol is. Like y'all read it as take the square root, but the symbol is actually called a radical. So we're gonna start really easy, and we're gonna list the first 12 perfect squares. So what I mean by perfect squares, what's one squared? One times one is one. What's two squared? Well, two times two is 4. What's 3 squared? 3 times 3 is 9. Do you see my pattern here? So I'm going to just keep going. 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25. 6 squared is 36. 7 squared is 49. 8 squared is 64. 9 squared is 81. 10 squared is 100. 11 squared is 121. And 12 squared is 144. Now, these are some that you need to try to memorize. Okay, so we're going to start really simple, and you're not going to have very many of these on your worksheet, but I need you to see starting simple because some of these you can do totally in your calculator, and others I need y'all to show me your work. So when I say what's the square root of 81? Well, if you look up here, 81 is a perfect square. So the square root of 81 is 9 because 9 times 9 is 81. When I say what is the square root of 484, we didn't list that high. So what you're going to do is grab your calculator. You're going to press second x squared and type in 484 and get your answer. Your answer is 22. Okay, when I do the square root of 64, 64 is a perfect square, and we know that it is 8 times 8. Okay, when you move to example 4, we now have 3 times the square root of 256. So you have to keep this 3 times, and I want you to find just the square root of 256. Wrong button. And that gives me 16. So now I have 3 times 16, which equals 48. Okay, now the cool thing is you could have typed this problem in the exact way it's written, and it would have still given you 48. But I'm teaching you how to do just the radical part first, because once we move down to the bottom half of the page, you're going to have to show work. So if you just put everything in the calculator, I'm not going to give you full credit for it. So moving over to 5, I have negative 5 times the square root of 121, which gives me negative 5 times the square root of 121 is a perfect square, and it's 11. So negative 5 times 11 would be negative 55. Okay, moving to fractions. When you have the square root of 1/16, as long as both numbers are under the radical, you're just telling me to take the square root of 1 and the square root of 16. So the square root of 1 is 1, and the square root of 16 is 4, and you're done. When you're doing, again, another fraction, the square root of 9 over 100, the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 100 is 10. So you're done. Okay, now, if you want to pause and write that part, I'm going to change this word from multiples to factors. That's a better math vocabulary word for y'all. So the first thing you're going to have to do is find factors with a perfect square. Then you must take the square root of the perfect square. So you're going to find factors. One of them will be a perfect square. One of them will not be perfect. You're going to keep the non-perfect in the radical. And that's really confusing at first, but as I show you examples, this will make more sense. You're going to really rely on your calculator if you need it for your factors. Okay, factors are your, what do you multiply together to get to a number? So when you look at the square root of 24, if I do this and I type in the square root of 24, you cannot give me a decimal answer when you're simplifying. So here's what you're going to do. Make sure you're paying attention. This calculator part is so beneficial in so many things we're going to do. We're going to go to y equals, and we're going to type 24 divided by x. So just the number under the radical and then divide by x. You're going to go to the table, and you're going to start at 0. When it says 0 in error, these are your factors. The reason it says error, when you do 0 times 24, you get 0. So that's why it says error here. It's not going to write 0 twice. Okay, and then it says 124. So 1 times 24 is 24. 2 times 12 is 24. 3 times 8 is 24. 4 times 6 is 24. We're never going to use decimals. So that 5 and 4.8, ignore it. And then if you notice, we go to 6 and 4. That is just the flip of this 4 and 6. Once it flips, you're done looking for factors. Okay, so what you're going to do, I'm going to pull my notes down just a little bit. You are looking for a number like this in the factors, a perfect square. Okay, so I'm going to look through here. I have 1 and 24. Well, 1 is a perfect square, but it's not going to do anything if I use that. I need a bigger one. 2 and 12, neither of those are a perfect square. 3 and 8, neither of those are a perfect square. 4 and 6, 4 is a perfect square. So what I'm going to do is break this up into 4 and, 6, because 4 times 6 is 24. Now I'm going to take the square root of both of them. When I take the square root of 4, I get 2. And if I come back over here and take the square root of 6, I'm going to get a decimal. So that means I can't take that. So I keep the square root of 6. This is the simplified form. Now, when you're doing your worksheet, a way to check it, I'm going to delete this problem. Okay, so the square root of 24, I'm going to now type 2 square root of 6. And if I get the same decimal, I got the answer right. Okay, so for this one, square root of 90, it's not a perfect square. So if you want to type, let me clear it out first. If you want to type in the square root of 90 to figure out your decimal, then you're going to go to y equals, and instead of doing 24, we're going to do 90 divided by x. I'm going to look through here. Now, I don't ever want to use the 1. So 2 and 45, neither one of those are perfect squares. 3 and 30, not perfect squares. I can't use 4 because of the decimal. 5 and 18, not perfect squares. 6 and 15, not perfect squares. Decimal, decimal. 9 and 10. 9 is a perfect square. So I'm going to use 9 and 10. I'm going to take the square root of 9, which is 3. Take the square root of 10. It's not perfect, so I leave it alone. So now I'm going to come back to my calculator, and I'm going to do 3 square roots of 10 and see if I get the same decimal. If I do, my answer's right. Okay, for number 3, I have the square root of 175. So the first thing I'm going to do, second square root 175, so that way I know my decimal. I'm going to go to y equals and type in 175 divided by x. Can't use any decimals, so I have 5 and 35. That's not a perfect square. I have 7 and 25. That is a perfect square. Decimal, decimal, decimal. The next one it comes back to is 25 and 7. So the only thing you can use is 7 and 25. Okay, when I take the square root of 7, it doesn't work, so I leave that one under the radical because we keep non-perfect in the radical. When I take the square root of 25, I get 5. So now I'm going to go back to my normal screen, and I'm going to do 5 square root of 7. Make sure I get the same decimal. Okay, moving down now. For example 4, I have 2 square root of 245. Okay, first thing I'm going to do, I have an outside number. I'm going to bring it down 2 times. Now I'm going to split 245. Okay, when I do 245, I got to go back up here to 1. Okay, I've got decimal, 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 decimal. I have 5 and 49. And then there's 7 and 35. Those aren't perfect squares. And it looks like 7 and 35 is going to be the next one. So the only one that had a perfect square was 5 and 49. So I'll scroll back up so you can see. 5 and 49. So I'm going to put in 5. I'm going to put in 49. When I take the square root of 5, I actually cannot do that. So I put 5. When I take the square root of 49, I get 7. Now it says 2 times 7 square root of 5. Well, 2 times 7 is 14, and then keep square root of 5. So now when I go to check my answer, I'm going to do 2 square root of 245, and then I'm going to do 14 square root of 5, and I should get the same thing. Okay, 3 square root of 117. I'm bring down 3 times. I go to y equals 117 divided by x. Okay, there's a decimal. Neither one of those are perfect squares. Decimal, 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 decimal. I got 9 and 13. 9 is a perfect square. And then it goes to 13 and 9, so I have no more multiples. So I have to use 9 and 13. When I take the square root of 9, I get 3. I can't take the square root of 13. So 3 times 3 gives me 9, and I keep the square root of 13. Okay, so to check it, we're going to do 3 square roots of 117, and we're going to do 9 square root of 13. I get the same thing, so I'm good. Okay, now 6 I'm going to show you a little bit differently because you're probably actually going to do this often, so I just want to clarify for you. Your worksheet's multiple choice, so you'll be able to figure out if you have the right answer easily. But on here, it's a little bit harder. So I need to find factors for 450. Okay, I'm going to start up here. I don't know if 225 is a perfect square according to my list that I wrote. So I'm going to move down. I don't know if 150 is. So I'm going to look for numbers that I know. I got 5 and 90, not perfect squares. 6 and 75, not perfect squares. 9 and 50. Now 9 is a perfect square. So I'm going to go ahead and write this, 9 and 50. Okay, when I do this, I take the square root of 9, which gives me 3. Okay, you cannot take the square root of 50 because it'll give you a decimal. But this is something y'all don't know yet, so I'm teaching it to you right now. 50 can split again. There is a perfect square that goes into 50. So I'm going to do 50 divided by x. And when I look at it right there, I've got 2 and 25. Okay, so I'm going to bring down this 3 and put a times. And now I'm going to take the square root of 2, which I can't do. And I'm going to take the square root of 25, which is 5. So now I have 3 times 5 square root of 2, which would give me 15 square roots of 2. Okay, I'm going to check this. I have the square root of 450, and I have 15 square root of 2. Now, here's the trick part. When you were right here, when you got 3 square roots of 50, that is also the same thing. It's just this isn't simplified. Simplified means broken down as much as possible. So you need to be careful here. And if you notice that there's another multiple that will come out, take it out. Okay, if you have any questions for me, when you get back, ask questions. And then if you need help on the homework, let me know.